In this tutorial, we will have a look at handling exceptions in a Struts 2 application. These are the steps we will follow. First, we will reuse our existing internationalization resources file project. Then we will learn how to specify and handle global exceptions. Then we will learn how to specify and handle an exception for a specific Struts 2 action. Then we will also learn how to log our exceptions in a log file. And finally, we will learn how to display an exception in the browser. So let's move over to Eclipse. So here is the Struts 2 exceptions insurance project that I copied over from our internationalization project. What I'll probably do now, I am just going to close all the other projects and concentrate on our exceptions project. Unfortunately, Eclipse is not smart enough to keep the servers open for us, so we will have to go back and open the server project. So the first thing we'll do is we'll actually make our register action throw an exception. And of course we won't reach the success. And let's see what happens now. And our exception here gets posted by Struts to our response because we have set the Struts development mode to true. And now we have to go to our next steps and actually handle this exception in a proper way. What we're going to do here is go into our struts.xml and define the global exception handlers. First, we're going to define the global results. And for now, we're just going to use a simple error result. This will forward to an error JSP that we still got to define. Now we're going to do the global exception mapping. And right now we have the exception that we already have in our register action. So what we're doing here is going to map that exception to the error result, and the error as a result will forward to the JSP page. So we'll create a new error.jsp. And this is how we will display the error. Make use of the struts2 property tag, displaying the exception and the exception stack. Back here looking at struts.xml, actually we need to move it into our insurance.xml because it is package dependent. If we look at our insurance package, we are on a different namespace. We will remove the global exceptions, specifications, and mapping from Struts XML and move it to Insurance XML. Here we can see our register input method. We have added the exception in the register class. This is our custom error page, so let's have a look and see what happens now. And here we can see that our custom error page gets displayed. For our next step, we will specify and handle an action-specific exception. So let's go back to our register action. If we look at our application, we see that you enter new insurance agents to the system. So one of the things that you'll often have to do prior to this is do a secure login before you can enter new insurance agents. Let's see how we're gonna handle this with Struts2 exceptions. First, we will define a security-specific exception. Here we have it just in a new package. We've defined the security breach exception that extends our regular Java exception. Now we will go back to our register action, and in this case we will now return to an actual success on execute, but we will comment out our validation code and we will add a specific methods that will throw the security breach exception. So we're going to have to go back to our Struts XML or our insurance.xml and add the definition. And we'll also have to add this specific action method to our menu.jsp. So let's start with our XML. So I've already entered it here. So if you'll have a look here, we added a new action called action specific exception. It refers to our register action and it references the method that we've created just now called throw security exception. Then inside the action, we do our exception mapping as opposed to where we previously did it in our global exception mappings. As we can see here, we forward it to a result of login. In our case, the result name login will refer to a dummy login.jsp page because what we're modeling here is a user that is trying to do a registration without having logged in. So let's see if we have our dummy login page in place. Yes, it's already in there. In this case, we are not going to do any specific logic to do the login. We're just displaying the exception handling for now. What we do add here is the special struts to debug tag to give us some more information. So now we gotta go back and add it to our menu.jsp. So we've got our register input in English and Spanish. So now we're gonna add our error specific register input method. We are going to make use of href actions. And here we can see that we are referencing the action specific exception, which should be present in our insurance XML, which is part of our struts.xml. Before we run our test, if we look at our menu.jsp, we actually use the insurance agent context path. So we better put that in for our action specific exception. So let's see what happens if we run it now. We choose our action specific security exception and excellent. It refers us back to our dummy login page with our debug tag. And if we click on the debug tag, we can see that it provides us with all sorts of information on the exception. Now for our final step, if we jump to the console and look at our output log, we will see an error here that says status logger log4j could not find a logging implementation. Please add log4j core to the class path using simple logger to log to the console. So now we're going to add some logging, and we are going to follow our error advice by only logging to the console because logging is a huge subject and it's worthy of another course in its entirety. But let's start with adding the log4j core to the class path, and in our case that would mean going down to our webinf lib directory and adding the log4j core. So let's go and find it and download it from the Maven repository. We're going to use 291, which matches up with our version of Java. I download the jar, save it, and we're going to copy it into our lib directory. Now, log4j is a logging framework that requires a configuration XML file, just like struts.xml. So we will add that to our class path as well. Here we will put it right under the source directory. And that is what our log4j configuration looks like. Goes to standard out, and we specify the info levels and the debug levels for specific struts2 packages. Now let's see what happens to our logging if we repeat the custom exception. Well, we don't even have to do the exception. We can already see that we have a much more verbose logging output file. Now if we want to log our customer exception, we have to extend our interceptor layer by using the exception mapping interceptor class, looking at the Struts 2 API documentation. It gives us some example code of what to do, and here is a good example of setting up the interceptor stack in order to log our interceptors. So this is what we'll do for our example. Going to our insurance XML, we are going to extend the interceptor layer as we've learned from the API. Here we add the interceptor layer to deal with logging exceptions. And let's have a look at our log console now. Here we can see that it actually logged our security breach exception to the console. And that concludes our exception handling tutorial. And for my YouTube students, there will be a link in the description to my Udemy course where you will be able to download a zip file of the source code. I will see you in the next video.